Hello, everybody. I'm Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet, about to be joined by Ken Weeb from the Winnipeg Free Press. Together, we are Kenny and Renny. This is the Kenny and Renny post-game show after a game that got away from the Jets. Looked like they were on their way to potentially, playing their third straight really, really close game where they're finding a way to get on the right side of the razor's edge. And then all of a sudden, the Columbus Blue Jackets took over that game. Their youth, their stars. One thing I'll say about the Columbus Blue Jackets, they're a team that they're starting to be defined in the way that they've got players now that are the kind of players that are showing up and getting the job done repeatedly, again and again and again. Like Voronkov, him showing up there. Kent Johnston's been having just a great year. Marchenko. I covered this team a couple of weeks ago. Now this is interesting. I don't know if I said it back then because I know we had a Kenny and Renny that night. I believe that was the Kings game. Had a conversation with Dean Everson before that game. If you remember the last game the Jets played against the Columbus Blue Jackets, the Jets just absolutely hammered them, and everyone was talking about Columbus at that time as being a much improved team. And I asked him, like, straight up, I said, you ran into the Jets there and they kind of tore you apart limb from limb. And then the same thing happened the next game that they played against the Washington Capitals. When you're a team like you are and you're trying to make a go of it, you're building belief, but that belief can be pretty thin, right? And did your belief get challenged? He said that's exactly what it was, right? Like, you're starting to win some games, things are going good, you're believing in the system, and then you run into the Jets who just pull you apart. And then all of a sudden, well, do I believe so much in this system anymore? Because, like, how does this happen? But it's a process. And I think what you're seeing from the Columbus Blue Jackets is that on a night they can be a really good team. I thought that they played a really good game against the Jets here tonight. And then on other nights, they can be not so good. And we've seen a little bit of a case of that. If you want to think of it through a Winnipeg Jets lens, think about the Rick Bowness era and when he comes in after the Jets missed the playoffs and had a really tough season before that. The Jets start out the year and they play really, really good brand of hockey until January, and things get a little bit rough. And then the bottom falls out and they almost fall out of the playoffs. I mean, what you're seeing there was a team that was building belief, but when you first start out, the belief is thin. Jets went through it. Their belief got stronger last year. We'll see where they're at with their belief this year. But the point of it is I've seen enough of Columbus this year to see that Columbus can be a team that challenges you and can be a team that challenges good teams. They beat a lot of really good teams so far this season. And that's what happens on this night as they beat the Winnipeg Jets. I'll say this. I like truth serum and getting everything front and center. Last game, I was completely useless because I hadn't seen the Jets game because I was busy in the Ottawa Senators broadcast. Tonight, I'm only half useless, folks. So that's the good news. Half useless because I missed half the game because my flight didn't get me home in time. I was in the air. I was redirected because of the snowstorm and spent a significant number of hours on the tarmac in Thunder Bay. So by the time I landed and started watching the game, half the game had ellipsed by that point. But what I was looking at when I landed, I think the shots were 12-3 when I landed. I think they ended up being 12-6 in the first period. I asked Ken through text at that time about like the idea of it was that telling the story. Ken had thought that, maybe that didn't exactly tell the story, that this was just shot volume on the part of the Columbus Blue Jackets and the Winnipeg Jets leading in, probably maybe sometimes where it counts and in the high danger scoring chances. And sure enough, I go look at that on Natural Stat Trick and I see that the Winnipeg Jets had 2 high danger scoring chances in the first period and there were none for the Blue Jackets. So I mean, 12 shots, 0 high danger chances for the Blue Jackets. But that said, they did outdo the Jets in scoring chances in the first period, 6-5. This is your classic, volume, like quantity versus quality thing. And the Winnipeg Jets go looking for quality in this game. And I don't know, does it cost them? In the end, it's some pretty quality opportunities that puts the Columbus Blue Jackets over the top in this game. But I also do think that if you just kind of get the volume meter going at some point, it leads to higher danger scoring chances. Hey, the Jets, they can lead in high danger chances all they want. Listen, is it important? Yeah, it's important because I think that's how the Jets won a lot of their games early in the season when they were looking like no one in the league could touch them. I don't know how many more times we can go through this, but we've said it time and time again on this show. We believe the kind of offense the Jets need to be generating is the kind that you saw Gabe Vilardi tip-ins in front of the net, the game winner last game against the Chicago Blackhawks, that get the puck to the net, get it to the dirty areas, capitalize on it. I haven't seen enough of the first. What I did see was the Jets make that really strong push towards the end of the game. The Jets have always been able to do that. There's no question in my mind, even when they are low, that the Jets are a team that they're going to make the last 5 minutes miserable. I think who it was, Mark Scheifele, the last game against the St. Louis Blues, talked about, forcing the other teams to maybe doubt themselves and squeeze their sticks. The Jets have always been good at that. So I was expecting that. What I see in that game was once again two very even teams, and then one team kind of making a stronger push, coming out on top. I wonder if the Jets are able to make a stronger push if they're that team that mixes in those high danger chances with just a little bit more shot volume, a little bit more grittiness, a little bit more just get the puck to the net, and maybe you build up a little bit of a rhythm. Because, hey, it is great to be that team that has the capability to survive a lot of shots by the opposition, getting outshot and be opportunistic and win a lot of games that way. Again, it's what they did quite a bit at the beginning of this season, and it's what this team has done for years and years. But you don't have to. Just because you can survive getting outshot night in and night out does not mean that you have to get outshot night in and night out. You can get out there and make it your business to just go and say, we are going to put a flurry of pucks on the net tonight. It's kind of what I was expecting after they played the Chicago Blackhawks. I didn't see that from the part of the game that I saw, from the little bit of the snippets of the replay that I saw. So I don't know that I like this game from the perspective of how I would have expected the Jets to play it, on the idea of, is this a build on top of what they did? So we go back 2 games ago to the Buffalo game, who you all know I was not a big fan of, but the Jets won it. So there's your confidence boost. Let's take that and see if you can build on that. They take it. They play the last place team in the league who lost 5 straight games. They play a tight game, but the right game. Now you've taken another step forward. To me, this is, if it's not a step back, it's definitely standing still and not taking a step forward in this game. And the one thing that I will say, the Jets right now went from looking like they were a different class of team than the rest of the NHL to now looking like parity exists entirely across the board. Because when was the last time you saw the Winnipeg Jets in a game against a team where it just looked like they had control of the game entirely? I guess you could throw that for the Blackhawks game, and that's what I'd said about the Blackhawks game. You want to be, when you play that team, you want to leave no doubt. But anyone who didn't have a look at the standings would have looked at these two teams tonight and would have thought they were right side by side in the standings. And you would have thought that the night that they played the Buffalo Sabres. You're talking about 3 straight teams the Jets have played now who've come in and played the Jets on losing streaks, vulnerable teams who are trying to figure things out. I'll say what I said after that Buffalo game. The Jets are right neck and neck with those types of teams right now with where their game is at right now. That's my take on this whole thing. Time to bring in the man with the best music in the business. For his take, here comes Ken, folks.
Whoa!
Kenny, both of us failing the Vittorio Rossi test on this night here. But both of us, we've got a closet at least partially filled with many, many different styles and looks from them. So if we were, though, a couple of those guys who did not have that going on, we could remedy the situation we find ourselves in right now by heading on down to Corden Avenue, walking into Vittorio Rossi, loudly proclaiming Kenny and Renny sent you, and asking for Frankie and the boys. They would do you up right. That's what you folks need to do. If you take a look in the mirror and you say, man, I'm looking like Kenny and Renny when they're not dressed up, and I need to remedy that. So
yeah, I think Frankie appreciates the t-shirt live from Florence, though, buddy. I mean, it's not sold at his store, but I mean, I think he would let me off the hook in this situation.
He's got some stuff that would probably elevate your game down there. I'm being honest. I'm being honest right now. Speaking of elevating games, did you see that from the Jets tonight? I'm not seeing from what I saw, and let's couch it. I only saw the back half of the game, and we know the back half of the game didn't go overly well for the Jets. But are you seeing growth, Ken, in what you saw tonight?
I mean, I didn't see growth from Saturday to Sunday. No, I thought the Jets were, they were stifling defensively on Saturday against the Hawks and giving up 3 shots in the second, 3 in the third, 1 high danger chance in total. Now, they didn't give up a ton of high dangers today, but 2 pretty critical errors is what I saw. And this is interesting, Sean. I mean, the Jets right now they're in that interesting spot because they're playing in a lot of these tight games, and you always talk about the razor's edge. I mean, of course, teams need to get comfortable in 1-goal games and in tie games. But if you're in them constantly, no matter how good you are, you're not going to win all of them, right? That's the thing. There's going to be a bounce here, a bounce there. Someone's going to make a smart play. The Jets made 2 critical errors. They ended up in the back of the net. 1 defensive zone turnover, 1. Scott Arniel called it a neutral zone turnover, but it was a turnover that started in the neutral zone, but was a 2.5 foot saucer pass that was not in a place where Dylan DeMello could handle it from Mark Scheifele, and it fed the transition, and the Blue Jackets went the other way, and it was not quite bang bang, but Kent Johnson scored on consecutive shifts, I think. So
nice goal.
It's interesting. I mean, I don't think the Jets were, again, some people thought the Jets were, really bad today. Overall, like you said, they generated enough, but they didn't convert enough, and they didn't get. It's not like it's funny. They didn't spend the game in their own zone, and they didn't give up a ton of quality either. But what they did give up was, the type of quality that gets buried into the back of the net, right? So, and I think compounding everything, Sean, is that in a tie game, they were in a tie game. Eric Comrie makes his best save of the night off Sean Monahan. And literally after the TV timeout, they have a kind of a brain cramp turnover, and it ends up in the back of the net, right? It was first the turnover, then no coverage in front, right? So we talk about it was the exact thing the Jets did on Saturday to get the game-winning goal.
Yeah.
Wild shot from a crazy angle, but with 2 people driving to the net. Neither Neil Pionk or Kyle Connor. I mean, it was 2-on-2, so each guy had to take one guy. The one guy got loose, the puck bounced to him, and there was Kent Johnson with the goal, right? So it's interesting. I mean, the talk after the game was about structure, and it's funny. Scott Arniel didn't really agree. Like it isn't structurally a problem. It was a mental breakdown on both of those things, I would say. And again, we praised Mark Scheifele immensely yesterday for his ability to come up huge when it mattered and score the game winner. And that line was on for 2 goals for Sean. Yes, today that line was involved in the power play goal, but they were on the ice for 2 5-on-5 goals against, and 2 critical goals where, transition issues, turnovers, and then lack of coverage on the 2 Kent Johnson goals. So, again, we've talked ad nauseum about how they've shifted the ledger. And yes, even in today, when they gave up 2 and got none at 5-on-5, they're still 18-7 outscoring the opposition for a line that started, 7-2. They've made up a lot of ground, but they want to be better than just one goal better than their opponent, I think is kind of where we're leaving it. And I'm not laying this at the feet of the Scheifele line. The Jets' other lines didn't generate nearly enough either today. But at the same time, the Jets count on that line to be more than just break-even type of line. So I think it's pretty fair to say that those guys would have liked to have elevated and not given up those 2 third-period goals also. So, I mean, again, not knocking them, but they had a couple issues that ended up in the back of the net. And that's always been the argument with those guys. And I'm not here saying they gave up 2 goals against Columbus. They should break that lineup. And I had some people sending me notes, Sean, like they send you, thinking that the blender would have been a good idea today. And I was in disagreement. The Jets didn't have enough guys really going to have the blender be effective.
Isn't that the point of putting on the blender, is to get guys going?
Sure, but I don't know. I just didn't feel like there were a ton of guys. Again, if you're just trying to throw something against it, sure. But again, I think the only blender option for me is moving Nino up a little bit, and that we know is not the preferred route. So
let's not bring up the blender to Ken, because that just is a chance for
it's an automatic. I'm sorry.
Ken doesn't want a blender.
Hey, sorry. I know you weren't watching at part of it, but Kevin Sawyer even brought it up today. So I'm not the only one.
You got to Kevin?
I've never even talked about it.
Don't worry. I'll talk to Kevin. I'll get him back.
And again, sorry.
Kevin,
people,
Sawyer,
I don't want
you're watching right now.
Up.
I will have the intervention you
want
need.
The line broken up, for the record. People know this. But when, the Lambert line isn't going, I think a little bit more of that, kind of bull in a china shop kind of, piece of the equation. You could flip-flop Nemesnikov and Niederreiter, and you would still have a very capable defensive player in Vladislav Nemesnikov who plays hard and is responsible defensively on the line with Lowry and Appleton. And then you would have a little bit more finishing ability with Niederreiter and a guy who kind of lives around the blue paint, trying to get Lambert going. And, Perfetti did have 4 shots on net today. So I think that was an important, development for him.
Actually, I thought he played the.
I thought he was involved.
Game.
Yeah, that he needs to.
Game we've been saying that he needs to play. Ken, I'm going to do something crazy here. Okay. I'm going to, because this show was built on me playing the devil's advocate a lot of times, right? And that's another way
of bring it.
The wrestling, villain,
Perfect.
whatever it is. I'm gonna go down this road of breaking up the third line, and what could be accomplished.
It's not breaking up. It's a short-term fix.
Yes. It's not a blender.
It's not a breakup.
It's more
not
like
a breakup.
Super sharp sushi knife, so he can cut Niederreiter off that line, move him somewhere else, and then say, "See, I told you so for years. Ken's been right all along. You've all been wrong." And then
that's incorrect.
That's what you want. You want a sushi knife,
and then
you want to stitch him onto another line, never to return to the third line again. That's what I'm kidding. But I will say,
I'm only mentioning it because Ehlers is out. That's why I'm mentioning it.
Sure.
Extra layer.
Well, now that's what it is this time. What was it the last couple of years? Anyways, I'm going to say this. I before we go there, before I play the devil's advocate with that idea, I'm just going to go to somewhere. BA Split has the excuse machine. It is chugging black smoke into the air. He is going crazy on this whole thing. I may be wrong, but 10 and 17 flying all over the place and playing less than 23 hours ago may have played a role. Perspective, and he's made many other comments. I'm kind of going to go in 2 different directions in this, but the one thing I'll say about this is there's a whole bunch of people who are coming in there. The schedule, and Ken, I had like someone who was texting me for a while when I was down in LA, and like a barrage of texts for days about how much he hated the schedule maker and the poor Jets and all this kind of stuff. If BA Split and all these folks who are just lamenting this schedule and the poor Winnipeg Jets who are going through something that no hockey team in the history of hockey has ever had to go through before. If they would have been in this chat room at the beginning of the years talking about how well things were going with the Jets and how conducive the schedule was for it to go like that for them, I'd have time for that. But don't be sitting here telling me everything is the Jets just being a phenomenal team when it's going right, and don't bring up the schedule and now things go wrong and start pointing this out. If the schedule's good and you're not pointing it out and saying, well, careful, the Jets are winning, but they've got a really good schedule right now, don't be showing up at this time and complaining about the schedule at that time of the year. This is a cold take, but I'm going to go in a hot take direction. We'll touch on this later, but Leslie Mitchnick says Comrie has been getting 0 run support. Jets could have won his last 4 starts if they could score goals in those games. This is
6 total goals. 6
right.
total goals. In
Over
4
games, and here's a guy who game after game after game has come in and given the Winnipeg Jets opportunities to win games. It is not on him what has happened in these games. In fact, he's given the Winnipeg Jets so many opportunities. Leslie Mitchnick, this is a red hot, screaming hot take. You must have cranked up the temperature in my Arctic Spas hot tub to have that hot of a take out there, because we know there's no such thing as a cold take in an Arctic Spas hot tub, especially one like mine with the Spa Boy package. It's just set it, forget it. It's a little slice of heaven in the backyard. If you want a little slice of heaven in your backyard, go talk to my boy Dustin. Go down to Arctic Spas, go see him, tell him Kenny and Renny sent you. Dustin will tell you everything you need to know. Okay, let's
just roll that right into wake up call for the Jets offense when Eric Comrie's between the pipes. Honestly, let's go.
Yeah, because this is it's actually, I mean, I always think I think it was Maul at the beginning of the year, and it was the Columbus game, I believe.
It was
the previous Columbus game that he was just offended by our suggestion that Comrie had been really good for the Winnipeg Jets. I mean, take a look at what was happening in this game tonight. You go take a look at that 2-on-1 goal, how anyone, I mean, if Connor Hellebuck's letting that in, it's the good old fashioned, well, there's no way he could have stopped that kind of argument. That, like, if anyone is pinning this game, or probably any of the recent losses that Eric Comrie has gone through on Eric Comrie, they're entirely missing the point and do need the Pristine Roofing wake-up call. And that means it's time to give North End Rick the Pristine Roofing wake-up call at 204-981-6289. He's the guy you want down at your place for all your roofing, siding, exterior needs. You can also go directly to Pristine Roofing and call them at 1-204-237-7663. You'll be glad you did, because just like what could be great for the Winnipeg Jets if they got the wake-up call, giving your house that Pristine Roofing wake-up call, you will thank them for it. Let me tell you.
And don't forget to tell them Kenny and Renny sent you.
No doubt. Okay, so I will say this, because you were talking about this line, and I know this is a line that the Winnipeg Jets top line, made some mistakes, right? They also go out on the power play. They get the 1 goal of the game, but I talked about it a little bit in the last show. Sometimes, when you're putting out the fires that you've created, it's not the greatest thing. But when you are that line that has come out, and on many an occasion, like in this game here tonight, 0-0, you are starting to kind of grind your way back into the game as far as like getting more shots, tilting the shot clock in your favor, and now you score. It started to feel like that. It was the ball rolling down the hill, and then all of a sudden that penalty gets taken, and boom, the puck's in the back of the net. But the one thing I'll say is, you wouldn't have to point to nights like this with that line if they had more run support. Right now, the Jets' offense has gone quiet. It's gone dormant. We think back to that Minnesota game where Alex Iafallo jumped up, so the fourth line jumped up and helped the Jets win a game there. You can't expect them to do it all the time, but you should expect them to be doing it some of the time. There are nights, especially here, back-to-back games, the front end of a back-to-back, when your top line goes out and wins you that game, that's when you need, hey, those guys did it for us last night. Tonight, we've got to get it done. We've got to go out and give them some run support. The Jets aren't getting run support. And I would say, Ken, just an overarching theme of needing to get going. This is where I would listen to, I would never do it, but I would listen to the suggestion that you move Nino, if anything, just to get a shakeup of saying, listen, you know how much we value the third line?
Yeah.
This is how serious we are. We are moving and breaking up this line because we are not okay with what's happening with the offense right now. Nick Ehlers being out is surely going to have something to do with it. But at the beginning of the year, it looked like the third line was starting to run away with their goal. And I mean, we talked about it last game. Nino Niederreiter hitting double digits this year. overall it's getting done. But this last stretch of hockey where the Jets are struggling, offense has been hard to come by for them. And sometimes when that's happening and you do the games that you do win are being sealed and taken away by your top line, at some point you got to get more
Yeah.
games where your second, third, fourth line are the ones who are getting it done for you.
And again, just to reiterate, the reason that you can even make this consideration, Sean, is because you have Alex Iafallo, who has done that job before.
Yeah.
You have Vladislav Nemesnikov, who actually was playing on that line in his first game, and Sean was on the ice against Connor McDavid in his first game as a Jet after the trade, I think, with Lowry and Appleton. So both guys are capable in terms of the defending part of it. But yeah, those guys have gone a little quiet, Sean. And Vladdy's only had 1 assist in 7 games, 2 assists in 9 games. And I would say this too, Sean. Morgan Barron is a guy that we believe can play on that line, and he played on that line 2 years ago before Nemesnikov arrived. But he's in a little bit of an offensive battle right now. Really nice play. Lowry almost got him with Barron great hustle to get the one-handed tip that just sailed over the top of the net. So, Barron's not contributing as much offense either, but he's still a big, heavily involved in the penalty kill, doing a good job on that fourth line. But, the fourth line offense is dried up. So, I mean, we talked about it yesterday. I think Mason Appleton is, the great camera work again by the broadcast. They showed Mason on the bench kind of grabbing his hand. His hand is taped up. He had that wrist problem a few years ago. Mason's obviously battling through something, but he's still playing effectively. But, it's a fact that he only has 1 goal in his last 17 games. And again, that line is doing its share of producing. But right now, the second line is not doing its share of producing. And that's sort of skewed the results here, especially, Sean, now that the power play has not been clicking. Yes, they got one tonight, but that was snapping I think a one. I'll double check before I just spit it out awkwardly, but I think it was another pretty high number. I mean, and that the only one of that 19 is the 5-on-3 that they scored late on. So, I mean, that's just something they've got to get going. And it's so funny. We knew that everything was going to kind of level out on a number of fronts. And the power play was obviously not going to be clicking at 45%.
Yeah.
But it's got to be more than, 5% in the various, or 5 or 10% in the various stretches either. So so they got to get that going. And, so that's why I just suggest Nino, because Nino is feeling it right now. And again, I just don't think that there's a big drop off in terms of the defending part and the hardworking part, and with either Iafallo or Nemesnikov primarily, and also Barron is a guy who can do that job also. So that's why you consider it. And I think, again, because you need insulation for someone like Brad Lambert, it makes sense that you want to have Nemesnikov and other centermen out there. But I think the trade-off in what Nino Niederreiter can give those guys in terms of generating space for them and also finishing ability, I think that would be a big boost for them.
This is an interesting take from Bob's Videos, who says moving Perfetti to the first power play has killed both units. He drove the second PP and is not working with PP1. You know what? I hate to say it. I always hate to say this, but T. Will with a great take here where he says the PP dries up and the offense dries up. Coincidence? Probably not. I mean, Ken, how much of this is the fact that a power play that we knew could not continue to operate at the rate that it was going, that when it finally came back down to earth, was going to maybe expose a lot of things in this lineup that we weren't seeing at that time?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a factor. And again, it's an interesting concept. I don't think it's as easy as saying, and I honestly don't think this is a blame Perfetti situation. Now, again, I think Bob is complimenting him for his ability to be a primary contributor on that second unit, whereas on the first unit, he's kind of finding his way in that pop position, as Davis Payne is calling it. I actually think that Cole is looking more comfortable in it, but they're not using it as efficiently or as effectively as they were when Ehlers was in there. And it's a new place for Ehlers also playing. So, yeah, there's obviously work to be done, but I mean, Sean, I think that, and again, I don't want to just be banging this drum when people think that I'm, you know, like I was the kid. Everybody jokes that the Gus bus didn't need a conductor, but Nino who's another guy that's had a lot of PP1 time in his career, Sean. Nino Niederreiter, a guy that can get to the net. He's got a good shot. He lives around the blue paint. If you're the Jets and you're considering a tweak like that, I would strongly consider Niederreiter for the ability to create some chaos either in the slot or getting to the blue paint. And obviously we know what Gabe Vilardi can do along the goal line and all of that jazz. And, we saw it again today. It wasn't a one-timer and it wasn't a, the usual Kyle Connor special, but Kyle Connor, even standing still, rips one off the post and in. And I have to say this, Gabe Vilardi doesn't get an assist on the play. He starts the play behind the net. Really good play to Scheifele. And I mean, the backhand pass from Scheifele to Josh Morrissey is elite, right? And then Kyle shows his elite shooting ability. So, I mean, that was a good example of back to what the Jets were doing earlier. Attack mentality, but with strong puck movement and some retrievals. We haven't been seeing as many retrievals and haven't been seeing as many second, third, fourth chances, which was something that we've seen earlier in the year. So again, I'm not here to say Perfetti needs to be off that line. He's ineffective there. But I do have some time for the consideration of, if they're going to try Niederreiter there, because they want to get more traffic maybe. And you also have a guy that can still shoot it from the slot. I could see that, but that's also to get Perfetti more touches on that second. It's now we're having the Nikolai Ehlers conversation, Sean, like in years past. So Ehlers maybe was more effective on the second unit because he got more touches. But now this year that theory is proving to be flawed because Ehlers has got a ton of power play points, even though he's playing a position that, we didn't think that would be a fit for his skill set because we thought he needed to touch it more. Well, this year he's, been exceptional in terms of power play production here so far. So it's interesting. I mean, worth a discussion, but I don't think it's as simple as saying, it's not going to work because Cole can't handle the responsibility. That I don't think. And I mean, again, Mitchell Clinton and I both were talking to Cole the other day about it, and he's getting the sense that he's feeling more comfortable in that scenario. And Ehlers no power play goals last year. He's got 3 already this year. Kyle Connor got his 6th power play goal this year today. Vilardi has 4. Perfetti has 3. So yeah, I mean, I think it's obviously it was going to be a work in progress, but I think there's probably a little bit more runway required before they go and make that change.
I'm just going to touch on this again. Every team I've covered so far this year, when we have a conversation with the coaches, they'll say something about their schedule, right? Like the Senators, I just came from them where they said what they were doing is they weren't on the road for a really long time, but they were on the road for a game and they were back in Ottawa for a game, then on the road and then back. And so what it is you can never get in a rhythm. You can never get settled. Even though you're at home half the time, you can never get settled, right? Like in the end, this is why you hear Arneal saying what he's saying. Everyone's going through it. Like I when I see this, and someone wrote in here earlier on, the Jets they're the 6th most traveled team so far this year. Well, aren't the San Jose Sharks the most traveled team in the NHL every single year?
Well, they do have some challenges that most teams don't. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, the challenges in the West are way different than in the East. I mean,
of course.
We talk about, the ability to have so many teams so close together. You're
hopping on the train. You're hopping on the train to go down. But like, let's put it this way. I don't ever remember when the San Jose Sharks were a dominant team in the NHL through the most part of the 2000s into the 2010s, right up to basically the late 2000 teens. I don't remember anyone ever making a big deal out of the fact that they were doing it in spite of their travel schedule, even though they travel more than anybody else. Like, there's a reason why you don't hear coaches very often. I know Paul Maurice used to, and that's why it seems like the Jets audience is very, very conditioned to really get into this whole, and here, like BA split missing the point. San Jose sucks, LOL. Like, they were dominant for years, the most traveled team in the NHL
20 plus years
every single year. Figure it out, try and understand the point that's being made here. But Like there's a reason most coaches don't sit and lean on this excuse, because everyone's got their travel problems. Like I don't understand why people think that this is a novel problem for the Winnipeg Jets. Well, there you go. Tyson nails it. Tyson Kremski, because it's an excuse. There you go.
Well, and just this, so
this is
for
what's
people who
needed
weren't
right now. So if
watching,
that's what you need to lean on, that's what you need to lean on.
both Kyle Connor and Scott O'Neill disputed the theory, dismissed it outright. So the Jets aren't sitting there feeling sorry for themselves. Would they like to sleep in their own bed more than 1 or 2 nights a week or in a 2-week stretch? Of course they would, but you get other days off to try to rest and recover. So the Jets are home for 4 here, Sean. The level of competition is getting much, I respect the way the Blue Jackets played, but they're not in the same class right now as the Boston Bruins or the Vegas Golden Knights. So, I mean, the Jets are getting a day off tomorrow after a back-to-back. They better be ready for Tuesday because they got a team coming in hot. And then you have the Vegas Golden Knights who have, taken the Jets' lunch money, for lack of a better term. So, they have a chance to get recovered and get some recovery in. And Sean, it's game 29 today. It was their second back-to-back only.
They only have
I think 8 total, right? 8, 7, or 8.
Six, I thought it was.
Okay, I mean it's not a high number.
They have
another one coming up in California this month.
I know
they haven't had many of them.
All I know is the Winnipeg coaching staff is extremely happy this year with how their schedule lined up with back-to-backs. That's all I know
for sure. But this was always going to be their toughest,
but
part of the schedule. But now you're through it, so let's see what you do when you get through it. Now they're through it. They're going to have their chance to reset again. Now it's up to them to show where they're at.
Says it's 8 back.
Okay.
So yeah, you had it right with that. I thought it was 6, but maybe when it was said to me, it was 6 before a certain time. I'm not really sure. Hey, why don't you give Sweet Lou a shout out before we get going?
Yeah, right on. For folks who have realty needs you'd like to have met, whether you're buying, selling, curious what the house on the corner of the street is going for, contact our main man, Lou Ferlin, at Royal LePage Dynamic Realty, 204-791-9971, or at the office, 204-989-5000. His email is lou@louferlin.ca. That's LOU@LOUFURLAN.ca. Lou Ferlin, excellent realtor, excellent human being, and excellent supporter of the community, including our podcast.
Partisan Paul says, you guys keep missing the point. It's the fans who suffer by watching tired teams play substandard hockey at a very high price point. This is taking this in a way different direction. So maybe we are missing the point. I didn't realize we were getting into a conversation like, where are we trying to take this? Let's play only 60 games a year. Let's scrap the Four Nations tournament. Like, I don't know where you're wanting to take this, Paul. I don't think we're missing the point. I think you're just trying to take the conversation into a wildly different direction. This is the NHL. This is like, again, someone did put it in here. They get paid a lot of money to be high performing athletes. It's impossible to be entirely on the top of their game, but it's their job to go out and find a way to get past it. That's what they do. That's their pros. It's part of their job description. I'm done. I am done with the schedule take and the tired and all this kind of stuff. It's just like acting like the Winnipeg Jets are the only team in the league that has to go through this is like, it's whiny and it's childish and it's like just flat out wrong. This is something, and the Jets themselves never lean into this. They know everyone else goes through this. So let's just get back to talking about what's going on with the team and how they're handling it. Colin Miller comes back into the lineup. What'd you take away from it?
Yeah, I mean, don't think it was Colin's best, but I thought he was involved in the game. 16 shifts for 16-11, Sean, today. 2 shots on net, 9 shot attempts. So, I mean, we know what we've been talking about quite a bit is that the Jets' defense core needs to get more involved offensively. So, well, if you can generate 9 shot attempts and add 2 blocked shots, that's a good day's work. He did have 2 giveaways according to the official statistics here, but I would say for a guy who sat out 3 of the last 4 games, was it 3 in a row and 4 of the last 5? Something in that along that line. He hasn't played a lot lately is the point. If you can generate 9 shot attempts from the back end, I would say that's a good sign. Are there things you can do better? For sure. But, for a guy who hadn't been in a lot and came in, I thought he did fine. Got some got 39 seconds of power play time when Neil Pionk was in the box after that scrap that was called roughing. Kyle Connor he said the players had some good laughs about that exchange and scuffle. But I thought he was fine. I mean, I think there's another level there, but I think he did what, his job is to generate a little bit of offense and not get beat defensively. I thought he did his job, more than adequately is how I would describe it. I mean, there's always going to be some mistakes. He hasn't played a ton with Logan Stanley. There's going to be some read situations, but I thought overall, given what he was asked to do, I thought he was pretty good.
And how about his defense partner? Where are you at? Because I just get the game starts and I'll get like,
oh yeah,
so many messages about Logan Stanley. Just your thoughts about the runway that he's being given. I think there's a lot of people upset out there because they figured the runway would have been applied to another player.
Well, I would just put it this way, and I mean, Scott Arniel addressed this after the game. I mean, today, so Logan, just for those who hadn't seen, 15 shifts, 16:59. That's a pretty high number, 107 average. Some of that was shorthanded time for sure. Stanley had 1 shot, 2 attempts, 2 blocks. I thought he was okay today. I don't think he flashed. I don't think he made a ton of errors. But in terms of the runway, folks, I've told you this from the very beginning, and Scott Arniel has been very transparent with it. The injury that Ville Heinola is dealing with his ankle and the recovery that had happened, playing a player 3 and 4 is not a very smart plan for the long-term health and well-being of the player. So this isn't a and fans are couching this as a Logan versus Ville scenario. That's not the case in every single game. It's an 82 game marathon, and the Jets are hoping to play somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 plus playoff games. So, this isn't Ville, every time he gets scratched, it's not a referendum on who's better or who's going to help them more in the longer term. It's meant to protect the players so he can contribute more over the course of an 82 game schedule. So again, if Logan Stanley is playing more down the stretch and when the games really matter most, then get as bent as you like to get. But right now, this isn't a coaching staff thinks Stanley's playing better, so Heinola sits. Like, that's not how his minutes are being managed. We talked about it. Ville did not have a good game the other night, but he was against Buffalo. Sean, you and I agreed it was one of his worst games as a Jet, I think. Yeah. But against Chicago, I liked his game better. So he wasn't being benched because the coaching staff didn't think he was playing well enough. He sat down. This is load management. Of course, he has to go as a healthy scratch because he's deemed to be healthy, but it's not full health. When you've missed that time over the last 2 years, it's not full health. So this isn't the Jets are killing Ville Heinola by scratching him. This is meant so he can play more over the longer term. Now, again, in terms of the rotation, I've told you this many times in the last while. Since we saw Dylan Coghlan, I want to see more of Dylan Coghlan. I mean, if the Jets are looking to incorporate a little bit of additional size and skill and mobility, I think that's a guy that has some of those qualities that maybe could get a little bit more runway himself. Now, I get it. The Jets haven't invested the same level of, resources and development time in him. And it's natural that they would, go to Heinola and Stanley first. And I'm not saying Coghlan over all those guys. What I am saying is that I would like to see a little bit more of him also in this stretch. But it's a really hard thing to do. And Dean Chenoweth talked about this the other day. If you think the fans are going crazy, the coach, where he said the thing that sucks about coaching is telling a guy he's not ready to play, even though the Jets have they feel 9 capable NHL D on the roster when everyone's healthy.
I said I was done with travel. I keep getting sucked back in. Waiter says it's not just playing back to back; it's playing that with travel. So today, I mean, I just came from covering the Senators. The Senators played a back to back. They're there last night, but the New York Islanders go in, knock off the Carolina Hurricanes last night, travel to Ottawa, play an earlier afternoon game, and win that game. Like, again, this is just like it's once again acting like this is something that the Winnipeg Jets are going through, and it's just this kind of this same old everyone's out to get Winnipeg kind of attitude. Whereas in the very same day, you're seeing another example of a team that's in a desperate spot doing the exact same thing and finding a way to come away with the points, doing the exact same thing. Yeah, again.
So I think so. Again, this isn't. So what Kenny's water bottle says, Jets did look like they were tired and didn't have it. They prefer to play around the perimeter, looking for seam passes for easier goals rather than working to grind out ugly ones. I mean, part of that is true. Like, that was the way that they played.
I think it's totally true.
It's
do the
100%
Jets look
accurate.
tired to me. I think they look tired. I thought they looked tired against.
But you got to
Buffalo.
play through it.
I'm not saying they don't look tired. I'm
know,
saying
but some people
being
aren't
tired is
understanding what
part
you're
of
saying.
being in the NHL.
100%.
That's it. Like, you got to find a way to get to your game when you're tired too. That's what it is.
Yes,
That's
sir.
what this league is.
Yeah, right on. Hey, quickly, Tishu asked, any update on Nikolai Ehlers? Yes, there was one. Mike McIntyre, my colleague from the Free Press, asked Scott Arnell at the end of the presser. The news on Ehlers is that there is an expectation that he could return to the ice this week. He was not more specific than that. I think that he meant he could be playing by this end of this week. He didn't say that he couldn't, but he didn't say that he could either. There is progress with Ehlers. There is no practice on Monday because the Jets just finished a back-to-back. They will play the Bruins on Tuesday. I think what this means is you could see Ehlers either Wednesday at practice, maybe Thursday morning at a morning skate. And if you see him Friday out of a non-contact jersey, then you can start thinking about Ehlers maybe against the Canadiens or maybe on that California road trip.
Let's turn this conversation this way. I feel like I just need to turn this conversation this way. So the Jets have said this before. The style of game that they play is a really, really hard style of game to play. So they come out at the beginning of the year and they're fresh and they're on that game and it looks great, right? They look dominant. They do what they did. We all know what they did. So maybe the conversation that we need to be having, rather than just constantly lamenting and being upset that the Jets have to travel and have to go to California and have to play back-to-backs, maybe the conversation that needs to be had is, can the Jets play that style of game as a team that will go through the same things that other teams go through that cause them to be tired and cause them to be exhausted? And then maybe you ask if that translates to the playoffs, when at the end of the year, when you have to have your best, like that, maybe that's the conversation that needs to be had, because everyone's just focusing on what I feel like everyone wants to do is they want to say, Jets lost tonight. This doesn't count. Crumple it up. Throw it out. This was a back-to-back. This isn't who the Jets are. And the other night, that doesn't count either because they were traveling. But maybe what you need to look at is the travel is the part of this. Like, whether you like it or not, it's part of it. And maybe the idea that, like, maybe that's what needs to be examined. Maybe the idea that the Jets, whose success comes when they play a super hard grinding game and they get on top of that game, maybe the question that needs to be asked is, through the grind of it all, can that game be continued to be played when you run into these kind of jags in the schedule, or when you get to the playoffs when everyone's tired after 82 games, when everyone's sore? Maybe that's the question that people who are always so focused on the schedule need to be asking themselves.
Well, Sean, and we're fortunate to know this about what travel is like in the playoffs, in the conference final, in the Stanley Cup final, for the teams that get lucky enough to win 4 and then win 8 and then win 12. Then you finally get a 2-day break between some of the games in the Stanley Cup final. Up until that point, Sean, every other day is the order of the day for the Stanley Cup playoffs. If you want to win the big silver trophy and you want to stack 16 wins, you're going to have to play every other night. And we've heard it from how many teams before. They love playing every other night because they get in a rhythm that way. Yeah. So it's, and again, now the difference is you're, in a series, it's 2-2, 1-1-1 or whatever. So it's different than buzzing around the country. Yes, we're not debating that. But what we're saying is, if you want to win the big trophy, you have to go through the grind. That meat grinder is tougher than the meat grinder the Jets went through, and no one's dismissing that it was a meat grinder.
Yeah.
But if you want to win, that's part of the deal.
Yeah. Finding a way to your game, not finding a way to win, finding a way to your game when it's extremely hard and challenging to get to that game. I did want to say this. No, oh yeah. Hey, Nikolai Ehlers this year, I was thinking he couldn't have done anything more to show his value to this
Oh.
Winnipeg Jets team than he did when he was on the ice. But him being off the ice, I
Yeah.
mean, so this is another one because I've had a lot of people who've talked to me and they've talked about making trades, and a lot of people float trades to me, and those trades involve moving Nikolai Ehlers. Well, take a look at what the Jets are looking like right now without the offensive spark that Nikolai Ehlers has provided and that offensive production. You got to think that even if you are trading Nikolai Ehlers and bringing something back for that, you are just trying to get that player to, like, if you're trying to do it to improve your team. We see what this team looks like now in the vacuum without his offense. So whatever player you're getting, if you're going to move Nick Ehlers, you need to bring in someone who is like replacing what he's done and then trying to add to that to make them a better team. So a lot of people to me have been like, and I get it, because people want to move Nikolai Ehlers in an effort to not lose the asset. And that's the situation that the Jets are in. I guess just what I'm saying is, if you are thinking that the Jets have a shot this year and you want to move Nikolai Ehlers to improve this team, the player you're getting back in that Nikolai Ehlers trade or players better be very, very good, because I think right now, just like we talked about with Sandberg and the effect he's had on the team has had with losing him, right now where the offense is at, this team looks like it desperately needs Nikolai.
Well, again, and some of those people are saying it's as easy as just plug and play with Brad Lambert. And again, I think that Brad had some moments in the game again today where he showed some of those flashes. 14-42 in the game for Brad, 19 shifts, but only one shot attempt. It was blocked. He had 2 hits, but he also took a pretty costly penalty in the game. But what I would say, Sean, how about, and some people noticed, but some probably didn't. The guy that came over the boards with the net empty was Brad Lambert, was the sixth player, or sixth attacker. So that was interesting and a good sign for him. We talked about it on Saturday. He had a couple good chances, one glorious chance that he missed. You're wondering always, does that mean the guy's going to squeeze the stick harder, or he'll relax knowing that, okay, well, I missed my gimme, now I'm going to go get one. So, and Lambert, I want to see more of Lambert. So right now, he's not close to replacing Ehlers' production, nor should you have expected him to. He's just starting his NHL career. I'm going to see growth. I'm going to continue to see growth from Brad. I like his long-term potential. But I don't see the Jets trading Ehlers, but some people do. So we'll see what happens there. I think that if there was anything the Jets were considering, it would have to be for a top 4 defenseman, which again has been reinforced by what's been happening with their play without Dylan Sandberg. But unless you're trying to change the composition, but I'm with you. Nikolai Ehlers' value has only been boosted
by his absence. Yeah.
Yes.
It's like absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Well, and again, that's also, folks, we're not missing the point. We were seeing brilliance in Ehlers while he was playing. The Jets miss him a great deal because they haven't had as much pop from that second scoring line since Ehlers has been gone, and neither is the power play. So
we've seen how good they are with him, used the way Scott Arniel has used him, and we've seen how much the team has struggled for offense without him.
And lastly, before we get to the other stuff, Sean, we know Nikolai Ehlers has to be better in the playoffs. I think 4 goals, 14 points, whatever it is. Nikolai Ehlers is the first person to say that. But to just assume that he can't get there is also a bad assumption, because people said the same thing about him, if he wasn't going to get on the power play. So at his age and at his skill level, there could still be a big breakout playoff performance. And that's what Nikolai Ehlers has to do. He's not the only one in that boat, but he is certainly one of those players that has to do that. But what he has shown this year, when given more responsibility, especially with the power play, he's shown that he can elevate. So now it's up to him to come back and continue to do that.
I think this is something too that if we're going to go back, rewind to training camp and all the people who were like really, really viciously angry, if you remember that Brad Lambert didn't make the team and they were
Oh yeah.
upset with Kevin Shovel-Dayoff about, the youth movement not arriving. And, when our analysis at that time was like, he's coming, but like he's not there yet. I remember very specifically talking about a faceoff he took against Adam Lowry, and Adam Lowry threw him aside like he was like a rake that you finish raking the yard with and toss off to the side. And what you're seeing right now is like there was a lot of people out there who were very angry the Jets cut him and were fully expecting that he would be their second line center. I mean, what you're seeing right now is what it takes for a really good young player to start finding his way at the NHL. The confidence level, the things Kenny's talking about, the opportunity, does that turn into confidence, or does it turn into him squeezing the stick tighter? Those are all questions you have to ask with young players like this. So back to then, I think this kind of does show for all the people who were just very, very angry that Brad Lambert got cut at the beginning of the year. I think we're starting to see why, especially from what you saw in the Mesnikov with that line at the top of the year. And Brad Lambert was not at that stage.
No, and folks, just to be clear, I'm bullish on Brad Lambert's long-term potential, but Nikolai Ehlers is a 60-point player that some people think should be an 80-plus point player. So to assume that a guy with now 5 NHL games under his belt is going to be either a 60 or 80-point player is just not, that's not something you should be doing.
Yeah. Anyways, I wanted to go back to Ehlers and just say one thing that I think that has definitely paid off for the Jets has been very specifically Arneal's faith in him as being a bigger part of the system. He has been, and the problem with having him be a bigger part of the system is when he is out, there's just a bigger hole left behind. But it did pay off to give him those opportunities. And if you're looking to pay off high interest credit cards or debt, we suggest you go talk to our friends at Cambrian Credit Union about their payoff loan. They can show you how taking out a loan to pay off your debt actually gets you debt-free faster, and you can save thousands of dollars. Go to cambrian.mb.ca to book an appointment online. Ken,
yeah,
what do you got for Johnson Group? Got you covered play of the game.
You know what? I don't have a specific play, but I do have Eric Comrie as a blanket statement. He had Connor Hellebuyck covered on the back end of the back-to-back and delivered another really good performance, giving his team a chance to win, doing exactly what the job of a backup is. So Eric Comrie had both the Jets and Connor Hellebuyck covered, but the Jets did not have him covered with any run support.
Yeah, no doubt. I'll go with that. And hey, do you run a small business in Canada? Look to Canada's #1 employee benefits plan, Chambers Plan, to give you a competitive edge. Chambers Plan is the simple, stable, smart choice for over 30,000 businesses countrywide. Visit chamberplan.ca to learn more. That's the Kenny and Renny OGs. The Johnson Group got you covered play of the game. And Ken, what do you got for the Lamplighter?
Yeah, Lamplighter has got to be the second Ken Johnson goal for me. It was like I said, some people thought it was dumping on Scheifele. I'm not. Mark has made cross ice saucer passes that landed perfectly many times, but this one was a little crispy, as we like to say. And because Dylan DeMello was joining the rush and activating like the Jets are supposed to, that pass needed to be a little bit better. But what I liked is how Columbus handled things in transition. I know someone in the chat room said that Josh Morrissey played it poorly. Incorrect. When DeMello goes, Sean, Gabe Vilardi has to be the F3 going back to cover for Dylan DeMello. And I think it looked to me, and I watched the goal over, the reason Josh doesn't stay in between the two players is because he thinks that Vilardi's going to catch Kent Johnson. That's why he goes to attack the puck carrier and makes the pass. So I don't think it was misplayed. I mean, I'll ask some folks when I get back home, but just the ability to convert, and B, to make, we always talk about it. And that's what has made the Jets so difficult to play against when they got off to this 20-9 start. When they play, the Jets are creating that turnover and burying it at the other end. So that's a repeatable goal that the Jets have scored ample times this year already. The fact that it happened against them today is, costly for them, but that's what I'm going with.
Kent Johnson, last time I saw him, had put up a point in every single game he'd played so far this year. This is a young player that, like a number of years ago, was a really, really high prospect that I was wondering if was going to be getting lost with the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now, he had been pointless in his previous 3 games before this, but 2 goals here has him in a good spot. They got to like where Kent is these days. Anyways, that's your lamplighter. I agree with it, Ken. Doesn't matter what I think. Let's see what the crowd has to say. And we can't see what they have to say until they share with us their TCB lamplighter. Do that, and you're automatically entered to win a frosty, delicious 8-pack of lamplighter amber ale brought to you by our friends at TransCanada Brewing Company. If you can't wait for Kenny and Renny to gift you your 8-pack, head on down to their tap room and get your own at 11290 Kenniston. Don't rob yourself of a great experience. Stay for a while, have some drinks, try the pizza, try the food. Absolutely great place, and it's looking great for the Christmas season right now. Our winner from the lamplighter from last show, that would be Snackatoba. You know what to do. Direct message me at SN Sean Reynolds. Give me your full name, give me an email, and I will send you a voucher for a frosty, delicious 8-pack of lamplighter amber ale brought to you by our friends at TCB. It is the nectar of the gods. And Ken, your keg save of the game, I think it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, Comrie on Monahan save of the game, probably his best save of the year, and well done by Comrie to get his glove on that. Like, it's funny. We talked about Hellebuck earlier, Sean. It was Hellebuck-esque. He made it look kind of easy with his ability to push across. Like, that's a brilliant save.
Yes,
I thought it was impressive.
Yeah, to me, I actually thought Ken was going to be like that turning point in the game where it comes down your way, and then well, I mean, usually it's a save like that, and the team heads down the other way and puts it in. Didn't happen in this case, but boy, oh boy. Hey, I think Dan Robertson had said save of the year candidate. I absolutely think so. That may be the nicest save we have seen, or I have seen live so far this season. Regardless, that's our hashtag the keg save of the game. Share with us your save of the game. You're automatically entered to win a $50 gift certificate usable at any of the 3 fine keg locations here in the city of Winnipeg. Each location finer than the last. And the winner of the keg save of the game from our last show, that would be Eagle Eyes. Eagle Eyes with a Z.
Great handle.
You know what to do. Direct message me at SN Sean Reynolds. Send me your full name. Send me an email, and I will have the fine folks at the keg send you a $50 gift certificate usable at any of the 3 fine keg locations here in the city of Winnipeg. Each location finer than the last. Ken, I wanted to talk about something quickly before we go here. You can weigh in. I think I did send something to you the other day. You'll have noticed on this podcast in the past, I'll rail when I think a player has dived. And I don't know how many people saw John Tortorella come out yesterday and just kind of rip into saying he's the kind of, one thing he does to the coaches, he teaches his players not to dive, not to embarrass the refs. He kind of went on a rant. If you see some of the plays that happened in that game, it looked like some of the Boston Bruins players were going down extremely easy, if not diving, and he felt that the refs, he wasn't blaming the refs. I don't think he liked the sportsmanship of the play on the other. If you go hear what he had to say, I could not agree more. This is my philosophy on this thing. This is why I think it's dangerous. This is why I brought it up in the past when I feel like I've seen it happen in Jets games. In that moment, I can think of one specific play, I won't name the player, but one specific play in which a Winnipeg Jets player took a penalty, and it was a little bit of a hard penalty, and he turned around and one of the other team's opposition came in to kind of meet up with him, and the guy gave him a little bit of a tap, and he fell to the ice. It was like, sniper in the crowd falls down. Clearly wasn't the contact that made him fall. He was trying to draw a penalty, and he evened it up, right? And as a fan, you want to say, oh, well, that's a smart play. He took the guy with him, and it's an even play. This is why I think it's bad. I think it's bad because if the ref goes in afterwards and looks and feels like you suckered him, I think that has the potential to change the way the ref thinks about you and thinks about your team. And so if you are sitting here in the first 20, 30 games of the year and you are drawing refs in and not my words, but embarrassing them, that's what John Tortorella thinks that you're doing when you do that. I just think that if the payoff is that down the line, refs come back and they're not giving you the benefit of the doubt anymore at the time of year when you need it, like you're heading towards the playoffs, you go into the playoffs, these things count now, and you can't draw a call because this ref remembers that, hey, remember back in October when you suckered me in a play there and embarrassed me? I don't like it. I think it has the potential to harm you down the road, even if it helps you in the moment. I like a clean, honest game where players, like I'm not into the soccer style of trying to draw penalties. If you heard what John Tortorella had to say, I could not agree more. And I do think it has the potential to harm teams. And I think now that John Tortorella has said it out loud, Ken, if you're a ref, now you've got a little bit more license to kind of hang out to dry the players that you feel do that, because you've got a voice and a strong voice in the NHL who's going to bat for that.
Yeah, I mean, certainly John is someone who's not shy about sharing his thoughts, and that's good. But the interpretation, I don't want a lot of interpretation from my officials. You better, this what I'm trying to say is, if you think the guy is diving, you better be 100% right, because it's as bad for a ref to make a bad assumption as it is for a player trying to dive and get a call. So that's where I go in the gray area. But when it's obvious, you better not do it. Like, just don't do it. I'm with you. Play hard, play the game the way it's meant to be played. Yes, there's going to be gamesmanship and everything else. You're going to try to sucker a guy into punching you in the face. I would say I didn't see you play, Sean, except in the big games, but I'm pretty sure you would have drawn a penalty or two by getting punched in the face. I certainly know that I drew plenty of penalties by doing the initiating and not the retaliating. So
I'll tell. Hey, you can ask Pat Rathwell.
And I'm not talking about diving. What I'm talking about is getting involved in suckering people in the way that PLD used to when he was engaged. That's what I'm talking about.
You know what? I was not good at that, because usually if I got a penalty, I mean,
you earned it.
Usually at best, there was two of us going. There was not very often that I drew. I mean, if I drew a penalty, it was an old fashioned driving the net hard and you get taken down kind of thing, right? But I wasn't very good at the old poking someone and then taking a shot and being if I got punched in the face, I was instantaneously trying to punch the guy back in the face, right? So I was not that guy who was the little honey badger. I was that guy who was I don't know. Yeah, whatever. Anyways, hey, people aren't here to hear about our glory days, which were not very glorious, Ken. Regardless, I am happy that they're here to share with the takes, sharing the takes with us, and make the time for us. I'll say this one last time too, Ken. One of our, I thought it was a little bit funny. One of our, because it's a loss tonight, people were referring to sucky boo boos in the chat room. So I'm leaving Winnipeg, and I go through security, and the guy who's running me through security says, "By the way, I shouldn't tell you this, but I'm one of the sucky boo-boos. I just can't bring myself to watch the show after the game." So he fessed up, and then it's funny because one of our recent Lampy or Keg winners sent me a note claiming and said, I hope it's okay I claim this because I'm one of the sucky boo-boos. So it's interesting to see where fans are at this season, because there's a lot of people who just will readily admit, I just can't bring myself to come here and talk about it after the loss. People are living and dying with the Winnipeg Jets this season. I think there's a lot of excitement that was started up from the top end of the year. And so now when things are going a little bit harder to go along here, people are having a hard time with it. I feel like that's going to balance out a little bit. And the sucky boo-boos, a lot more of them are going to make it as the year goes on. But the sucky boo-boos definitely owning up to it in public.
Good on them.
Good on them. Anyways, thank you, everybody. For those of you who did show up and are not the sucky boo-boos, we do appreciate that, seeing the faces here time and time again. Thank you to you. And I will say this to all of you, sucky boo-boos and the regulars. If you appreciate the conversation happening in this space, I would implore you to appreciate our sponsors who fight to keep the conversation going in this space. For us, that's Vittorio Rossi, Pristine Roofing, Sweet Lou Furlan, Cambrian Credit Union, Arctic Spas, the Johnston Group, the Keg, and TransCanada Brewing Company. Thank you to all of them. Thank you to all of you. We can't wait to do this again Tuesday. Boston
hang
Bruins.
on. I got a couple quickies here.
Okay.
Sorry. Great hustle by you to get back, Sean. Great commitment on the weekend when you had a lot of planes, trains, and automobiles. We talked about Tyson Kozak the other day, the Cirrus product, or actually I don't think we talked about him enough outside of his goal being disallowed. Sabres did get smoked again, as you mentioned, but Kozak did not have the second goal that he scored taken off the board. Yes. And having talked to him for about 10 minutes in the morning on Thursday, Just a guy who appreciates where he came from. He has the great tattoo with the coordinates of Cirrus on his left forearm as a reminder to stay grounded and to remember where he came from. Incredibly hard worker, 7th round draft pick. Just a dogged and determined player. Really pretty goal. Impressive job by him, and just another great Manitoba. And Sean, as a couple of rural Manitobans, we're not afraid to show it and shout out those opportunities and efforts. And it's funny. I read Paul Friesen caught up with the mom, Michelle. Trevor, the father, went home after the debut. The mom stuck around and got to see the goal that counted. So cool moment for the family. And speaking of family, quick one, folks know that I had my dad on this trip. We were in Chicago. He was at the Blackhawks game, his first time at the United Center. Had a blast there. And today, just an absolute shootout at the OK Corral in Minnesota here. 42-21 game for the Vikings, 5 touchdowns for Sam Darnold. And just a real special moment for me and my dad, and it was just awesome to be here, and glad we got to share it with our listeners and viewers. So it was just pretty darn cool stuff. So
that's a great trip, Ken. Those are the kind of things I remember. My dad took me to a bunch of Jets games when we were a kid. You want to know why I have that Whalers hat? My dad took me to the Montreal Forum in 1986, the year that those two teams went through a war in the second round. But in the regular season, I went and saw the Whalers in that old, like the pure white logo, and that's one of the reasons I have that, because like when I think of my childhood and I think of my dad, and one of the things that we shared, my dad passed coming up on it'll be 10 years next year, but that's one of the things I think about, was him taking me to the Forum, because he always said, you got to go see this kind of history and stuff like that. When I saw the Whalers, I was like, the Whalers, Mike Liut was in net. I was like, why are we seeing such a cruddy team? And then now it's kind of like the way that they stand out in my head. So Ken, you sent me a picture, folks. Ken sent me a picture. Actually, I probably should have taken that picture and thrown it up there, but the smiles on your and your dad's face, that just warmed my heart. That was great trip. Good on you. Great son, great dad combo there. Thanks for sharing it with us, Ken.
My pleasure, and thanks for listening. Take care, everybody. Thanks for being here.
Everybody. We'll see you on Thursday.